Four social leaders have been murdered in Colombia in the last 24 hours. It made a security crisis for activists and community leaders that risked their lives for a better future for their country and the region. According to Telesur's correspondent in Colombia, Manuel Jiménez, Carlos Jimmy Prado Gallardo was a human rights activist and national delegate for the Afro-Colombian Raizal, Black, and Palenquero communities in their popular consult in Nariño. He was killed in the Olaya Herrera Santingo municipality on Saturday night. According to Jiménez, at least 7 social and community leaders have been murdered since Monday. We now go to José Manuel Jiménez in Bogotá for the latest.
Numerous social leaders have been killed in the last hours. Also, a former member of the FARC in the Department of Córdoba, Orlando Negret, who was president of the El Camur Community Board in Tierra Alta, Córdoba, was killed. Julio César Montalvo, brother of the indigenous governor in Córdoba, was also murdered. In Antioquia, Fradi Estivar Chica, former FARC fighter, was killed. Carlos Jimmy Prado, human rights activist and national delegate for the Afro-Colombian Raizal, Black, and Palenquero communities in their popular consults in Nariño, was also killed. Those are the most recent murders of social leaders in Colombia in the last hours, but these killings add to last Monday's murders when 3 indigenous leaders were assassinated in the department of Valle del Cauca. On Wednesday, a professor was killed in the same department. Del Mayo Reyes was a math teacher but also worked with young people to prevent the use of drugs. These regrettable murders take place in the midst of a second round of presidential elections. According to social leaders and investigators, these murders are aimed at sowing fear in the regions, so that on election day the communities will be scared to vote.
Thank you, José Manuel, for that report. Environmental emergency groups working on the Ituango hydroelectric project are still on red alert. This was revealed by President Juan Manuel Santos after a meeting with ministers on his cabinet. The mandate analyzed the current situation of the dam, which has created a massive displacement of people affected by the complications related to the mega project. And a commission of experts in engineering and American military delivered conclusions showing how the situation has evolved, from the announcement of risks to an eventual overflow of the Cauca River on which the dam is built.
Risk is high. Risk has not decreased. On the other hand, risk has been increasing because of the sliding that happened on May 26, exactly 1 week ago.
Police in Mexico are investigating the deaths of 2 more political candidates after their bodies and those of their companions were found on Saturday morning. Candidate for Yuchitan's council, Pamela Terán Pineda, together with her driver and photographer, were shot dead after leaving a restaurant. Legislative candidate Juana Maldonado and a city public health, environment, and education counselor, Erika Cáceres, were found dead after the pair had completed a campaign visit to Jopala. At least 105 electoral candidates or people involved in the campaigns have been murdered since September, according to Mexico's National Police. Proceedings to elections to be held on July 1st. And National Council also indicated that in addition to these murders, more than 370 politicians have been victims of threats, aggressions, and intimidatory actions. With a little less than a month until the presidential elections in Mexico, social organizations are demanding candidates speak publicly about their agenda for the environment.
León Fierro is an activist of the movement Mexicali Resiste, dedicated to the defense of water resources in the Baja California state. He was imprisoned in May 27 for participating in protests against granting water resources to a U.S. brewery company. The local government intended to grant 20 million cubic meters of water per year to the Constellation Brands firm.
50 degrees Celsius, and the only thing that allows us to stand the heat is the Colorado River. It is the only thing that keeps us alive. Yet every year there is less water.
Social pressure stopped from passing a bill that granted permission for agricultural resources exploitation and ordered a construction of a pipeline with public money to bring water to the company.
It is totally regrettable, but enough is enough. This water management should not continue in the hands of private companies and corrupt authorities who receive economic benefits for participating in this.
Environmental organizations regret that the presidential candidates have not presented environmental proposals and to protect environmental activist rights. In less than a year, 30 activists have been killed across Mexico.
Environmental activists who protect water resources are being persecuted. Social movements are fighting to obtain agreements with the state to support and protect environmentalists.
Sustainable development and climate change are part of the topics that will be addressed on June 12th, in the third and last debate between the presidential candidates, who will also discuss the economic growth, poverty, and education in the country.
Pope Francis has called for an end to violence in Nicaragua as renewed violent protests were sparked in the Central American country as part of an unrest that began in April against the government's proposed changes in Social Security.
I join my brother bishops of Nicaragua in expressing sorrow for the serious violence carried out by armed groups to suppress social protests which have caused deaths and injuries. I pray for the victims and their families. The Church is always for dialogue, but this requires an active commitment to respect freedom and, above all, life. I pray that all violence cease so that the conditions for the resumption of dialogue can be found as soon as possible.
Protests in the Nicaraguan city of Masaya escalated into a pitched battle between riot and police protesters. Parapet walls, barricades made of stones, tree branches, and barbed wire were seen on almost every block across the city. The old market of Masaya, a local tourist site known for souvenir and craft stores, has been devastated by fires. For more on Nicaragua, we go to our correspondent.
It's a day of relative calm at this time, but the atmosphere remains tense. This Saturday in the city of Masaya, about 30 kilometers from the capital Managua, numerous protesters set fire to buildings in the commercial center, including private houses and a market, that burned in neighborhoods in cases similar to what we've seen since the crisis started on April 18th. They also committed violent acts against the national police delegation in this municipality and protest of the great amount of violence committed against the population. The national police arrested some of the protesters and obtained an arsenal that included a shotgun, pistols, bombs, and gas. The action in Masaya destroyed various neighborhoods in 10 consecutive attacks, robberies, and fires in public buildings, and more than 140 businesses have reported incidences.
Thank you for your report. Nicaragua's Roman Catholic Cardinal Emeritus Miguel Obando y Bravo, who supported the Sandinistas in their struggle to topple the Somoza dictatorship and later helped mediate peace efforts between them and Contra rebels, died on Sunday at age 92. Obando y Bravo, an outspoken defender of human rights, opposed the repressive Somoza family dictatorship that ruled Nicaragua for 44 years and supported the leftist Sandinistas' right to use arms to bring down the government. In Guatemala, the remains of the young migrant murdered by the U.S. Border Patrol has returned with her family in the municipality of San Juan Ostuncalco. Locals came out to show respect and solidarity.
The Mayan people expressed their condolences to the family members of Claudia Gomez Gonzalez, the 20-year-old killed by the U.S. Border Patrol on May 23rd.
I have never seen so much support. Before the ceremony and even with the rain, the people were on the street waiting for his sister, ma'am.
Claudia Gomez was shot in the head when she tried to cross the U.S. border with another group of migrants.
She was a 20-year-old young woman. Her dream was to move to the United States and get a job, but unfortunately, she was murdered.
Local people agree that the murder of Claudia has unveiled multiple crimes that occur at the U.S. border, mostly against poor people.
United States citizens need to understand that we're not migrating to steal their jobs. The U.S. government, companies, and foreign policies make us migrate. They make us leave our cultures and our families behind.
Residents here are trying to send a message to the government, hoping that they have a conscience about this crime.
This message is directed to the President of the United States. What do you think about this murder that happened in Guatemala?
There has not been any statement of the government. There has been no condolences from President Jimmy Morales to Claudia's family.
The Mayan people, social organizations, religious groups, and local journalists were present at the funeral. There was no sign of any state representative.
We'll take a short break now, but join us again after this look at what our multimedia colleagues are reporting. Welcome back. In Venezuela, the president of the Constituent Assembly, Delcy Rodriguez, has participated in a Truth Commission meeting to discuss the framework of the peace process. Rodriguez said that members of the peace process accepted the invitation of President Nicolás Maduro to join the peace talks and call for democratic solutions to end violent actions and intervention in Venezuela.
Hay espacios para la disidencia política.
There is room for political differences, but this must be democratic and respectful. We can only reconcile ourselves through political and social dialogue. On behalf of the Truth Commission, we hope you will replicate this message of peace to the Venezuelan people who want to stop violence, intolerance, and conspiracies.
10 years have passed since the official launch of the Transitional Justice Commission in Ecuador. The commission to investigate crimes against humanity in the 80s, unfortunately, hasn't always provided families with the comfort they need. Our Denise Herrera reports.
Gustavo Garzón's brother, who was an Ecuadorian writer who disappeared on March 28, 1970, Rodrigo, for 48 years, has fought most of his life searching for answer into the circumstances in which his brother disappeared. But so far, no evidence has been found. Relatives believe it was a political disappearance.
We haven't even started assisting the victims' relatives in the legal process because the prosecutor's office hasn't opened a case. They are still investigating. We haven't made any progress.
Authorities of the Ombudsman's office, academics, students, victims, and relatives gathered at the University Andina Simón Bolívar in Ecuador to discuss the decade since the Truth Commission was formed to investigate and try human rights violations during the administration of León Febres Cordero. In the 1980s, unfortunately, few cases have been prosecuted.
In Rodrigo Brujas' administration, there was a police death squad called the FtS that persecuted, tortured, murdered, and disappeared young people. The police deleted all of the records related to the FtS, and even today, they are still denying the existence of this group.
The government has not done much to investigate the forced disappearances, which were allegedly mostly carried out by previous administrations. So the relatives of the victims have created an independent association to push the authorities into action.
Life goes on, but it's important to keep demanding justice.
Earlier this year, Garzón's relatives received a report from the Inter-American Court on Human Rights, their first semblance of answers for the first time in 48 years. The report said irregularities were found in the investigations. According to them, the struggle will continue to ensure these crimes never occur in Ecuador again. Denise Herrera, Telesur Quito, Ecuador.
Hundreds of thousands of revelers flooded Sao Paulo's Avenida Paulista for the 22nd annual Sao Paulo Gay Pride Parade. Organizers built the event, which draws a massive crowd from all over Brazil and the entire world, as the largest gay pride parade in the world. The event is organized every year by the nonprofit APO LGBT. This year's slogan was Power for LGBTI, Our Vote, Our Voice, as activists demanded rights for the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and intersex communities. Now we go to our correspondent in Brazil for more details.
There are more than 3,000 people gathered here at this time, coming through Paulista and other regions of Sao Paulo. In the beautiful second edition of the LGBTQI Pride Parade here in Sao Paulo, it's a big celebration and amplifier of the voices of people in this population. In a country with one of the highest rates of homicides of LGBT people, in a country where it's been approximately 80 days since the head of the Council of LGBTI in Rio de Janeiro, Mariela Franco, was assassinated, and where there have been seen an increase in deaths of this population, along with the closure of the Ministry of Human Rights by the de facto government. For this reason, in an electoral year, this sector of the population is showing that their voices must be heard, and to vote for LGBT candidates and activists as a way of moving forward.
Thank you for your report. Guyana celebrated its first gay pride parade in the capital, Georgetown. The parade is the result of the work of the Guyana LGBT Coalition and signals the end of a week of activities to promote safe sex rights and queer tolerance in the Latin American country. Participants wore colorful costumes and danced to soca music in the streets. Church groups have come out in condemnation, but organizers say they are not trying to legalize same-sex marriage. Their only goal is to promote awareness. In Chile, governors were invited to participate in forming national agreements coinciding with the wave of feminist movements taking place across the country. Inside Congress, close to 1,000 guests were in attendance, while outside demonstrations took place, including calls to end sexism in education. President Piñera announced the themes of the newly negotiated national agreements that address issues such as childcare safety, spending plans, crime, and gender, but equality within education was not explicitly discussed. He made several nods to enshrining women's rights in the Constitution and boosting public spending on a privatized pension system, blamed by many for insufficient payouts.
We are advancing towards a full equality of rights, duties, opportunities, and dignity between men and women, respecting our legitimate and wonderful differences. We are moving towards a culture of zero tolerance against all kinds of violence, abuse, harassment, arbitrary discrimination, or bad treatment of women.
The truth is that until now we haven't even been part of the dialogue as secondary students. They didn't have any intention of having conversations about the legislation, and obviously that's not what we're looking for anyway, because they're going to make the decisions behind closed doors. Now what we have are the protests. That's going to be the way we move forward.
Protesters have marched at the construction site of the U.S.-Mexico border wall. Protests have been a regular fixture at the wall since the United States announcement to build the wall, and an ongoing dialogue between U.S. and Mexico leadership over the plan, its financing, and implementation.
President Trump and his administration have a very clear goal. That is to implement their anti-immigrant racist agenda at all costs, disregarding the fact that in this process families are being separated and children only months old are at the border asking for asylum.
The Palestine Football Association chief has called on fans to burn the shirt and picture of Argentinian soccer player Lionel Messi if he plays against Israel in Jerusalem this weekend. The match was originally slated to be played in Haifa, but Israeli authorities contributed funding for it to be moved to Jerusalem, a move which was irked Palestinians, further following U.S. President Donald Trump's recognition of the city as Israel's capital and moved the U.S. embassy there last month. In Argentina, after 5 months of gathering petitions, several groups presented 1,200,000 signatures in parliament to repeal a pension reform law that's set to slash payments.
With the norm approved in December of last year, in the midst of a brutal repression that left hundreds of protesters injured and 60 illegally arrested, the current retirees, pensioners, workers that are close to retirement, as well as former Malvinas combatants are among those that stand to be affected.
Many legislators are now thinking about the great disgrace that they are involved in. Firstly, when they voted in 2016 for the badly named law of historical reparation, all of this disaster began with that law.
Let's hope that the people that are in Congress pay attention this time.
This is an outrage. So, what can we do, recess?
The organizers of the campaign have consistently warned that with the change of payments, they will end up receiving 11.2% less. And while previously they would receive 29% more at the end of the current year, they will now receive an increase of just 18.4%.
Both the executive and legislative branch have the potential to stop this reform. Unfortunately, between the enactment of the law on the sad December 20 of last year and today, we have had one item of bad news after another. Increasing debts with the IMF don't help. The fund asks that we continue adjusting more and more on the weakest sectors.
The initiative demanding the repeal of the pension reform was born from different social and political groups that work in the defense of the elderly and the most vulnerable sectors of Argentinian society.
We are the victims of this situation. They have appropriated funds for pensions. But we are not the only victims. There are 40 million victims. We are fighting because of the tariff increase and, as it turns out, that the gas and electricity companies are owned by the very same people that are usurping the government and invading the country.
With more than 3,500 tables installed all over the country in the course of 5 months, the promoters of the campaign managed to exceed its target numbers of signatures. Now it's time to wait for the reaction from the Argentinian parliament.
The International Monetary Fund, IMF, says that it will be sending a delegation to Barbados on Tuesday to assist the island in its plans for revitalizing the ailing economy. Prime Minister Mia Mottley has already indicated that her administration would not be adverse to seeking support from the Washington-based financial institution. We'll take a short break now, but join us again after this look at what our multimedia colleagues are reporting. Welcome back. Israeli Defense Forces have released footage of yet more bombs being dropped on the Gaza Strip. The IDF claimed that it struck a total of 15 targets in northern Gaza throughout Saturday night, targeting 3 Hamas military compounds near midnight and a further 5 locations belonging to the Hamas naval force several hours later. Israel said the strikes were in retaliation to rockets allegedly launched from the Gaza Strip earlier on Saturday. 9 people have died and 1 is missing after a speedboat carrying 15 refugees sank off the coast of Turkey's southern province of Antalya. 5 people were rescued by the Turkish Coast Guard and fishermen. Europe has faced a migrant crisis since 2015 following wars in Libya and Syria, with more than 1 million people from Africa and the Middle East attempting to reach the continent via Turkey or by sea. Several Jordanians have been injured during a demonstration that was held near their prime ministry in Amman in protest against an IMF-backed tax reform bill. Thousands of Jordanians continue to protest near the prime ministry in Amman, chanting slogans against Jordanian Prime Minister Hani al-Mulki and the new income law. King Abdullah was quoted by state media as saying both parliament and government should engage in national dialogue to reach a compromise over the bill. At least 3 people have been confirmed dead and several are feared trapped after a 5-story building collapsed in a residential area of Nairobi. Locals rushed to the scene to help before rescue workers arrived, digging through the rubble of the building with their bare hands. They rescued a man and a woman who later died in the hospital. And we've come to the end of this news brief. These and other stories, you can find them on our website at telesurtv.net/English. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I am Stefania Bravo. Thank you for watching.